لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. بسم الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد. في هذه الدقائق المعدودة, in these few minutes, taking advantage of our time, being that the majority of the people in attendance have traveled from far, seeking benefit. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all blessed wherever we are, and make us from those who benefit one another wherever we are. And as the hadith that is often mentioned of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said to the Sahaba, سَيَأْتُونَكُمْ أُنَاسٌ, and the people will come to you all, يَطْرُبُونَ الْعِلْمِ, seeking knowledge. And one wording of the hadith, يَطْرُبُونَ حَدِيثَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, seeking a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَقُولُوا لَهُمْ مَرْحَبًا, so say to them, welcome. فَنُجَدِّدُ هَذِهِ التَّرْحِيبِ, so we renew this welcome, and we say to our brothers that have come from far and from near, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ أَجْرَكُمْ, may Allah write for you all your reward. وَأَعْظَمَ اللَّهُ شَأْنَكُمْ, and may Allah magnify your affair. وَأَخْلَفَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَمْوَالِكُم, and may Allah replace the money that you spent with better money. فَوَاللَّهِ إِنَّ هَذَا الْأَمْرَ, which you brothers are doing and sisters, is something that we see from the Salaf and from those who came before us, spending from that wealth and that time, ابتغاء مرضات الله, seeking the pleasure of Allah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward everyone and to increase the likes of these gatherings. The announcement was that Akhuna Ustaadh Sheikh Hassan al-Somali was going to give a kalima, لكن قدر الله ما شاء فعل, يعني اعتذر, he had something important to do at the moment. So that the time did not go wasted, يعني إن كان من شيء فالله عز وجل blesses us to benefit from this time. So we'll say a few words. And the topic that I want to speak about, or these few words that I want to speak about, is shukr, being grateful. Being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The verse that was mentioned in the khutbah, وَتَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained that if you all were thankful, that He will certainly increase you all. لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. For those who are studying the Arabic language, then you'll find in this verse the various types of a tawqeed, of emphasis, that are found in the Arabic language. لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Certainly and indeed, I will increase you all. فَكَيْفَ يَكُونُ شُكْرُ اللَّهِ. So how is thankfulness shown to Allah? These various ni'am التي أسبغ علينا. And Allah has mentioned in the Qur'an, وَأَسْبَغَ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعَمَهُ ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنَةً. He has bestowed His various favors and blessings upon you all. ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنَةً. Outwardly and inwardly. Ni'am, blessings that you see in front of you. Blessings that you see upon yourself, inside of your home and in your families. And blessings inside of your own body. The health that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And greater than that, this aql, this intellect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And greater than all of that, the hidayah, guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a servant. These various ni'am in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about on the day of resurrection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about these various ni'am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about how do we act with these blessings of guidance to the Sunnah, to guidance to uprightness. How do we act with our eyes and our ears? How do we act with our hands and our feet? And these various ni'am, نسأل الله يعفو عنا, we ask Allah for His pardon. For we disobey Allah much, and we fall into sins much. So much so that even we begin to forget the sins that we do because we've now busy doing more sins. Wallahu ya'fu wa yasfah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to pardon and to hide our faults. These ni'mah, ya akhwan, cannot be taken for granted. And the ni'mah that I want to speak about at this moment, especially during this time of the year, is a ni'mah la yuwaziha ni'mah. None of the various blessings that could be spoken about can compare to it. Ni'mah to Islam. The blessing for Islam. And at times we become complacent and we forget about that. It becomes like an aada, like a habit. That we wake up and we're Muslims. But during this time of the year, and you see the Nasara, the Christians, busy for shirk, busy associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal, busy with their acts that anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ascribing a son to Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about that evil statement, تَكَادُ السَّمَاوَاتُ يَتَفَطَّرْنَ مِنْهُنَّ وَتَنْشَقَّ الْأَرْضُ وَتَخِرُّ الْجِبَالُ هَدًّا أَنْ دَعُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدًا. You see them busy with that. And many of us come from backgrounds of Christianity. Whether it was our fathers, our forefathers, or even ourselves. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon us Islam. In this ni'mah, this blessing, how do we show thankfulness for it? How do we show thankfulness for this ni'mah when living in these lands? That we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala zahiran wa batina, outwardly and inwardly, upon the tongue, and in your limbs, and in all of your actions. As you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Islam. You thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He did not make you a mushrik. Because on the day of resurrection, and those who associate partners with Allah, and they are thrown into the hellfire, and their screams on that day, Rabbi rji'un, oh my Lord, allow me to return back to the earth. لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا, so that perhaps I will do some good deeds. And it will be said to them, كَلَّا إِنَّهَا كَلِمَةٌ هُوَ قَائِلُهَا وَمِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ بَرْزَخٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَمِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ بَرْزَخٌ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. جزاك الله خير. الفائدة, the importance of الاستحضار وكثرة قراءة القرآن. So the person, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this blessing, guided to Islam, this opportunity to work busy themselves with actions that lead to paradise, actions that will save them on that day, when the people who associate partners with Allah Azza wa Jalla will be thrown into the hellfire. And many of the Salaf, they said, I fear that I will stand in front of Allah on the day of resurrection, and I'll be thrown into the hellfire, وَلَا يُبَالِي, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not care about me. They feared that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this opportunity of being Muslims. That the person, they think and they ponder seriously that on the day of resurrection, when the hellfire will cry out to its Lord, يَوْمَ نَقُولُ لِجَهَنَّمَ هَلْ امْتَلَأْتِ وَتَقُولُ هَلْ مِن مَزِيدٍ. And Allah will say to the hellfire, هَلْ امْتَلَأْتِ, have you become full? And the hellfire, due to the many numbers of people that are in the hellfire, هَلْ مِن مَزِيدٍ, the hellfire will say, and is there any more? So the person has to be grateful for this ni'mah. And when a person is ungrateful for the ni'mah of Allah, فَهُوَ حَرِيرٌ يُسَبَ مِنْهُ, then he is most deserving that Allah take it from him. If we are not grateful for Islam and busy ourselves and our families and those who we love with calling them to Islam and obeying Allah and striving to be the best Muslim we can be, do not think that Allah will not take Islam from you. For we live in trying times, as the Prophet ﷺ informed us of these trying times that will come. And he said, بَادِرُوا بِالْأَعْمَالِ, hasten and rush to do good deeds. He didn't say be complacent. He didn't say be lazy. But he said, بَادِرُوا بِالْأَعْمَالِ, hasten and rush to do good deeds. Rush to perform good deeds. Before a time will come, a man will wake up as a believer. يُصْبِحُ الرَّجُلُ مُؤْمِنًا وَيُمْسِي كَافِرًا. and he will go to sleep as a disbeliever. يَبِيعُ دِينَهُ بِعَرَضٍ مِّنَ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٍ. And he will trade his religion for a small portion of this world. أخبر به الصادق المصدوق. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most truthful of mankind, informed us of this. And it will happen, and there's no doubt about that. We have no doubt in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he informed us how the hearts will change, and how the fitna will be shown to the hearts, and how some people will accept it until the hearts become black, like upside down vessels, not accepting good and recognizing it, nor rejecting any evil. And how others who reject evil from the beginning until the heart becomes pure and white, like a vessel, clean vessel, which accepts and recognizes good and acts upon it, and it rejects evil. As we find in a hadith which is in Sahih Muslim upon the authority of Hudhayfa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, تعرض الفتن على القلوب كالحصير عودا عودا فأيما قلب أشربها نكت فيه نكتة بيضاء نكتة سوداء. To the end of the hadith. So the individual during these trying times, and as I said, this is short advice, something that we often need to remind one another of, that we're grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we show this gratefulness the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. From those examples of showing gratefulness is hastening to perform the obligations. And that is everywhere. Many times we're living in places like this, especially in far out lands, far from other Muslims, we may become lazy. We don't hear the adhan being called, so we delay our prayers. We delay our salawat. We don't see other Muslims, so perhaps we become weak and play games with our religion. We begin to mix with non-Muslims and pick up their characteristics. And that is not showing Allah gratefulness for this ni'mah of Islam. Ni'mah of Islam in a land when the majority of people have been not given that ni'mah. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ بِهَا. So do not be ungrateful. Strive to fulfill these obligations. Especially as, speaking to people that I'm assuming are younger brothers, perhaps you're in college or in high school, you have jobs, whatnot. احرص على ما ينفعك. Be concerned and give great diligence to that which will benefit you. احرص على المأمورات. Be diligent in that which Allah has commanded you with. 5 salawats. Be diligent in that. Be diligent in staying away from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. Be diligent and strive your best to be far away from the things that anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of that is examples of showing gratefulness to Allah. From showing gratefulness to Allah for the sight that He's given you, that you only look at that which pleases Allah, that you only touch that which pleases Allah, that you only walk to that which pleases Allah, you only listen to that which pleases Allah. And from the gratefulness that a person shows is what they do with their heart. They only love what Allah loves. They only hate what Allah hates. And they do not expose their hearts to shubuhat, to doubts. And they do not fall into their desires. From the affairs that many times happen to young people in these societies is that they take for granted this ni'mah of Islam and they expose various doubts to the heart. And doubts, shubuhat khattafa, they kidnap a person. They begin as small doubts. A doubt in a matter of creed, or a doubt in a matter of aqeed, or a manhaj, something small. And it grows, and it grows, and it grows. As we find in the hadith of Hudhayfa, until the heart becomes black. And that is from the signs that they were not grateful for the ni'mah of Islam that Allah gave to them. And from the affairs is that a person, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them this blessing of Islam, is that they support Islam, support the Muslims, support the Sunnah. And support is not only financial. Many times the mind jumps to that. And that person, maybe at times their financial state is not the best state, so they're not able to do what they wish they were able to do. And keep in mind, if you're sincere and sincere to Allah, Allah shall reward you for that. But what you can do is supplicate to Allah and beg Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beg Him subhanahu wa ta'ala that He keep you firm and that He spread Islam in these lands. That He gives victory to the Muslims. That He gives stability to the Muslims. That He allows Islam and the Sunnah to spread in these lands. Think of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ on a day of Badr. In this hadith, wallahi, always, when it comes to mind, should humble us. For the Prophet ﷺ, دَعَى رَبَّهُ حَتَّى سَقَتَ رِدَاؤُهُ. He was calling upon Allah and begging Him until his garment, his top garment, fell off. And that did not stop him. He continued to beg Him. The night of Badr. And Ikhwan, remember the battle of Badr. The Muslims were how many on that day? Approximately 310. And they were few. The numbers that they had were not only little numbers. They did not come out for war. They did not come out for battle. They came out for what? Eid Quraysh. For the caravan of Quraysh. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them a battle. Ala kullin. They were outnumbered and outpowered. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam begging Allah and begging Allah and begging Allah that He give them victory and He give them steadfastness. Until Abu Bakr came to him, he said, كَفَاكَ مُنَاشَدَتُكَ رَبُّكَ. It's sufficient for you, Ya Rasulullah, you have done of supplication. The Sahaba were amazed at how much and how long the supplication was. So in trying times and living in lands like this, increase in supplication. This point cannot be stressed enough. Increase in supplication. Increase in remembrance of Allah. Do not be someone who only remembers Allah little. When they're in the salah, they're rushing through their prayer. They're rushing through the adhkar. Be someone who makes much dua to Allah. Much supplication to Allah. If you leave from this short kalima, inshallah, with nothing other than that benefit. The verse of Allah. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, idhkuru Allah dhikran kathira. O you who believe, remember Allah much. Remember Allah much. That is from the signs and examples and manifestations of showing thankfulness to Allah. Because a person who remembers Allah much, then often they are remembering the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. So remember Allah much. In these lands and in every land, remember Allah much. Sahib As-Sunnah, lahu fi dhalika uswa. The person of the Sunnah has an example in this. وهو Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And a doubt that comes from the shaitan and confuses a person at times is that when you hear a person making much dhikr, their mind it goes to where? To who? To Sufiya, sah wala la? If a person sees someone, Allah, 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 which is bid'ah. We don't say do that. We say make the dhikr of Allah al-mashru'a fi kitab al-sunnah. The remembrance of Allah that is found in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Look into the Sunnah. How did the Prophet ﷺ call upon his Lord? What did he say in his supplication? At what times did he supplicate to Allah? At what times, in what situations did he say certain things? And follow that example. And this type of dhikr is praiseworthy. We're not speaking about the dhikr in jama'i and the various innovative things that are done by Ahlul Bid'ah. Rather, we worship Allah Azza wa Jal and show gratefulness to Him by abandoning those affairs and abandoning those gatherings and recognizing that those gatherings will only increase us with farness from Allah and that those gatherings will only bring humiliation to the Muslims.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم رب هذه الدرجة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمد الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعث اللهم مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رسولا نبيا.
And I'll end on a few points on this topic of gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we mentioned that gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upon the tongue also, and one's statements, one's actions. We mentioned a person making much supplication to Allah. And keep in mind the times in which are ahra, more probable for the acceptance of supplication. This is something that many people perhaps they do not know of. Many they may know of, for example, the last hour or time period on the day of Jum'ah. And some they may know between the adhan and the iqamah. But if a person is able to sit down and to gather all of those times, which are between the adhan and the iqamah, and there's an hour on the day of Jum'ah where no supplication is rejected. Some scholars they mention that it is the last hour of Jum'ah. That seems to be the strongest, wallahu a'lam. Some they mention that it is before the khatib begins the khutbah. And also from those times in the last third of the night that the person calls upon Allah, because we find in a hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He descends and He says, هَلْ مِن دَاعٍ فَأَسْتَجِيبَ لَهُ. Is there anyone supplicating so I can accept their supplication? هَلْ مِن مُسْتَغْفِرٍ فَأَغْفِرَ لَهُ. Is there anyone seeking my forgiveness so that I may forgive them? To the end of that hadith. So a person takes advantage of those times with making much supplication. And a person showing priority to these things is in itself a sign of showing their gratefulness. That Allah guided them by taking advantage of these times. And right now we're in one of those times. So I prefer that we stop at that point. This is simple advice. Between now and the iqam, alhamdulillah, is a time where the supplication is more likely to be accepted. فَأَكْثِرُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الدُّعَاءِ. So make much supplication to Allah. For the goodness for yourself and for your family and for those around you. For Ahl Sunnati Amma. For the mashayikh that have taught us, Jazakumullah khair. For the ulama of Islam. You find from the Salaf that made dua for their teachers in every salah. Made dua for them and recognize their virtue. Like of Shafi'i and other than him. Make dua for them that Allah Azza wa Jal rewards them, forgives them for their shortcomings. And walillah alhamd, in a beautiful munasabah, is that even after we pray Salat al-Asr, you have the last hour of the day. Many of the ulama say from after Salat al-Asr. And many of the Salaf on Yawm al-Jum'ah, after praying Asr, will stay in the Masjid, remembering Allah, making supplication until the time of Maghrib. And they will not leave from the Masjid. So take advantage of those two things. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His beautiful names and perfect attributes to reward all of you brothers. For Allah inna al-julusa ma'akum la-sa'ada. Allah is sitting with the people of the Sunnah is something that brings about happiness. Something that increases the Iman. And that humbles a person. And it reminds them of the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To meet brothers from all over the world. From far and from near. وَلَا يَجْمَعْهُمْ إِلَّا السُّنَّةِ. And nothing is gathered to them together except for the Sunnah. Wallahi la dunya, there's no dunya. No one's coming here to pay one another. No one's coming here because there's some type of dunya we benefit, but rather they sacrifice, and we ask Allah to reward them for their sacrifice. And I just remind myself and remind the brothers, strive to be sincere to Allah. Be sincere to Allah. Allah bless you to get this far. Strive to be sincere. Do not allow the shaitan to destroy your action. Do not allow the shaitan to creep into your action and destroy it. Do not allow the shaitan to creep into these beautiful gatherings which you have done of traveling and destroy that. For Allah Ibn Jawzi, he mentions from the greatest plots of the shaitan is to turn them away from knowledge. So you're already here for the knowledge. Do not allow him to turn you away from it. Sallallahu tawfiq fi dunya wal akhirah. We ask Allah for success in the dunya and hereafter. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.